Hi everyone, in today's lesson we're going to paint in our poppies that we've drawn out in a black fine liner on hot press watercolour paper. I think we're going to paint our poppies this evening in varying shades of cadmium red. You could paint your poppies in yellow, purple, red, anything you desire. You can paint them in watercolour or ink tints, even metallics, or the Derwent Graphitint range, but for this evening I'm going to demonstrate using just cadmium red watercolour to build form and three-dimensional shape, and using a wet on dry technique. Because we're using hot press watercolour, we're not going to be using wet in wet. It's going to buckle it, it's going to cockle, and it's not stretched, so we're not going to be using lots and lots of water. I'm going to show you by using this flower here. It's got lots of folds and it's got 1, 2, 3, 4 layers, you could say 5 layers of petals. So let's look at where we're going to start. Okay, so if for example you look at this layer here, we can see we've got one underneath. This one underneath is going to be in shadow, and this one over the top is going to be lighter. So I want you to take a second to look at these areas of how they're going to be built and how they're going to fall in shadow and in light. Okay, so if you look at here, the light would come across there. It's then going to darken in this fold, then the light would be here. Okay, I'm using a Billy Showell number 6 brush, which is a sable brush. Not much water, okay, not much water at all. And on my palette this evening I've got cadmium red deep, cadmium red hue, cadmium red pale, and then for the real darker shadows I've got alizarin crimson. So first of all, a little dip in the paint and I'm picking up cadmium red pale. Little tiny dip into the palette on its very lightest bit. And as you can see, I'm only doing really dilute wash. I would rather paint in light layers and add more than dark. We're going to paint in sections. Now the ink we used is a waterproof ink. Okay, it's not going to run, it's not soluble, so it's not going to go muddy. If you used a soluble ink, it would be a muddy mess right now. So you can pick up some more paint that you've got diluted on your palette, and drop it in. Because you're not picking up more water from your water pot, you're not changing the consistency of the paint, therefore you're not going to get cauliflowers. What you can do is then pick up a darker red. So let's pick up cadmium red hue, and in the darker fold, just pop in and drop in. You're not over manipulating it, you're just dropping it in with a very, very tip. Just a very, very tip. Wash your brush off and dry it on some kitchen roll. And if you can see any areas where it's started to get a join, just smooth it over. That's all you have to do. So you're painting with almost a very dry brush. Okay, so you've got a nice transition there. Dry your brush off for me. Okay, so we're going to move on from this area. If we were to paint any of these petals there, what's going to happen is it's going to go too soft. So it's almost like when we did the blue tit and we were doing one section at a time, the same is going to apply. Okay, so dampen your brush. It is only a damp. And let's pick up a pale cadmium red. So here I've got cadmium red deep. It's more of an orange shade, the Cadmium Red Deep. Okay, so the light's catching the edge of that petal. Okay, now it feels quite dry to paint with, but what I'm not going to do is dip it in the water again. Okay, so I'm getting down to here. It's getting into this fold, so I'm going to pick up straight from the palette, Cadmium Red Deep. Again, a little bit more. Increase the depth of the paint, and then I'm moving on to the Cadmium Red Pale, which is this one here, which is just a little bit more vibrant. You'd think it would be the other way around. And then picking up a Cadmium Red Hue right in this fold. As you can see, I haven't reached for my water. Wash your brush off, dry it. Really important that you dry this brush, because what you're then going to do is soften all the joins of your colours with this brush. Okay, now I'd be tempted to do underneath here, but I'm not. I'm going to leave that. It's really important that this gets left. Okay, so where are we going to go next? This is drying. You can tell it's drying because it's already started to go 2 shades lighter. But we're going to go around here. Now underneath here is where it's going to be at its darkest. Right underneath here. But here it's going to be at its lightest. So we're going to do something different. Whereas we've gone light to dark, we're going to have our lightest edge along the here. Wet your brush. Pick up your lightest shade of cadmium. Don't keep going all the way around, because what you're going to end up with is a hard line. You don't want to do that. You need to paint it straight into here. Otherwise you'll end up with bands. And you don't want bands of paint. Okay, wash your brush off if it starts to carry too much water or too much of one colour. Bring out your lighter cadmium. Paint quite fast when you're doing a larger area. There's no point fiddling around with it. It's not going to help. You're not going to gain anything by working slowly. Let's get the paint on here. Again with the tip of your brush. Okay, now this is on, let's get some darker red in here and drop it in to the shadows. Don't just do one straight line. It will make it look false. Again, you will not hear me dipping in water. Let's put some lines in. Some of these folds. Okay, let's wash our brush off, dry it. Really give it a good dry. It's the drying that's the most important thing. It doesn't matter if it looks hairy. This doesn't matter. Because what it's doing is it's softening. So this doesn't matter. You're not punishing the brush. Not at this stage. can always straighten it. Okay, so we've now started to get a shape. You can really start to darken things up if you want. Pick up a bit of alizarin crimson. Not everywhere, otherwise it loses the effect. Okay, so you don't want it everywhere, just really in the darkest places. Okay, so this needs leaving alone. We could go around here. Okay, re-wet the paint in your palette. And this time we're going to be painting inwards. Let's flick this paint in. Make sure you stop when you get to a little mushroom shape in the centre. So you want to follow the natural form of these lines. So you don't want to paint against them. Don't be painting like that. Turn your hand . Again, you won't hear me dipping into the water. I don't want to change the consistency of the water, because the consistency of the paint, thereby creating cauliflowers or any hard lines or joins. Okay, so whilst that's still wet, pick up some red, dark red. I need to re-wet the palette. If it dries, re-wet it. Take it to the centre. This time flick out. Lift the brush off at the last minute. What you don't want is a blunt end, blunt flat end. Pick up some of the alizarin crimson. Again, no dipping in the water. Unless you wash your brush off, then dry it. Just soften it up with a lovely clean brush. Still follow the direction of the curve. Never work against it. Otherwise it's just going to look flat. And all this hard work will be undone. Okay, so we've got that. Let's get this line in underneath. Now let's pick up some alizarin crimson from the palette. Then some cadmium. Okay, so right in the fold. And then Let's go. Okay, so we've done there. Let's take it here. Now you can see the paper starting to cockle and buckle, but not hugely. We can get away with this. Okay, there's the highlight is going to be here in this curve. So let's make it darker towards the bottom of the petal. Okay, and what we can do is take a little bit of water, blend it upwards. Okay, so as that dries, it's going to dry paler. We need to leave this darkened area here, because if I was to put in the paint in this section, it's going to bleed and soften. So I can go darker though, underneath there. It should have dried enough not to bleed. Equally here. Okay, so let's take alizarin crimson. Let's take some cadmium red in there. Okay, just on that edge. Wash your brush off. Dry it. Then take cadmium red. Okay, so if it starts to paint too dry and it's dragging, don't fight it. Take your brush away. When watercolour starts to fight, there's only one winner, and it's watercolour. You will never beat it. You will always lose against it. Take a breather, walk away from it for that split second. Okay, let's get some the alizarin crimson underneath there. Whilst it's on your brush, always flick some into any shadows that have softened. If it's on your brush. Okay, so we've still got one petal left, but the surrounding petals are just too dark, too wet still. Just not happy to paint that yet. Really not happy at all to paint that yet. So what I'm going to do is, this centre section here is black, but I'm going to make black, and I'm going to take dioxazine violet. Dioxazine violet and Payne's grey. First. Okay, because nothing on this section is truly black. Just drop my brush down to a number 5. Okay, so whilst this red is just finishing off drying, I'm going to put in an underpainting of dioxazine violet and Payne's grey. And you're going to be putting in an underpainting and highlight of purple. And the reason for this is you don't want everything to be flat. And if you paint everything flat black, you're going to lose the lucidity, the magic. The centre of poppies have a shine to them, almost a violet colour. amongst the black. And they also have a bit of green. So let's take a bit of green. Just leave it there to dry. Whilst that's going off, let's finish this red. Okay, so we're taking cadmium red and alizarin crimson. Now it's a mid petal. Okay, so it's in the midst, it's in the shadows. There's no real highlights on it, but there's a curl just on this edge. So on this curl on the edge, let's take a cadmium orange just to capture it. So I've mixed a cadmium orange with a cadmium red. And as you see, none of the ink has run because we used a permanent pen. So what you can do is if you're not sure if you've got a permanent pen, just go around your house, just testing them all. Draw on a piece of paper, get a damp brush, and just run water, your brush over the pen and see if it moves. If it doesn't move, you've got a permanent pen. Okay, so let's, on this stalk, we've got a bit of stalk showing underneath. Whilst that's going off, just take a bit of sap green. The sap green shows up lovely against the red. And just put the stalks in. Okay, there's nothing wrong with using black. Absolutely nothing wrong with using black. Okay, so you can either use ivory black or lamp black. Okay, so let's go for a bit of ivory. There's absolutely nothing wrong with using black and watercolour if it's for a purpose. Saves you making a muddy colour. Okay, let's soften these edges. Wash your brush, dry it off. Really dry it off for this. And let's soften these joins. So what you don't want to do is start lifting it off. And you want the purple to be showing through, not overtaking it with black. So you can always go back in. It's softened that little bit too much. Damp your brush. Work it neat into the palette. And you can always pick up a bit of purple. Rather than just keep going with black, pick up a bit of purple. Make some highlights instead. Okay, and there you have one poppy. You can paint the other poppies however you like. Remember to paint each petal separately using 3 shades of a colour. So if you're using cadmium, maybe cadmium red hue, cadmium red pale and cadmium red deep, and do it in layers. Take your time, do each petal separately, build it up. You can do yellow, purple, red, however much you like, and let me see how you get on. Take care.